contest, DQ contest, Kilo 8, Papa Oscar, Kilo.
Here at the Ham Exposition, I'm out at the flea market. Not much here at the flea market that I really cared for, but apparently there's some good stuff that other people like. I went inside, took a look inside, and they have a nice display inside. Flex is here, Elecraft is here, the ARRL is here. So you got on inside, it is a big improvement over what it was last year. I don't know how the attendance is this year. I did an interview with someone running for director of the New England division, and you should see that. You should see that coming up. There is another person running for director, who is the director, and if he agrees to an interview later, you will see that, and if he doesn't agree, you won't see it. The person I did interview did not ask for see the questions at that time, unlike Dave Minster, who I tried to get for an interview a couple of years ago here. He wanted to see all the questions ahead of time. A real man of courage. In any event, the weather here is perfect. There was never a question of any problems with rain. So you'll see some pictures around here, and thank you for watching what's coming up next. If you stay. Okay, you're Tom Frenet, K1KI, and what are you running for?
I'm running for the New England Division Director position on the ARRL board.
And you've been, when was the last time you were on the board?
6 years ago.
Okay. And why are you running this time?
Primary reason is I think over the last 6 years the board has not found its direction. It's doing too many ceremonial things and not enough policy and focus on the organization and the things that we need to engage the FCC and Congress on, and can't stand it.
What is this thing called, the shadow board? I've read something about it.
There are some significant differences on the board, and a group of them has set up their own email distribution system so they can talk to each other without talking to the full board, which means organizationally it's not a good thing, because they all should be in the same conversations and talking to each other, and there's just too many hard feelings, and some of it has to do with policy, some of it doesn't, some of it is just complaining to each other. I guess I'll describe it that way. I'm not engaged with that group at all, and I don't see any of the board's messages, but you can see it from the discussions that are reported in the board minutes.
Well, I see. I'm on a local school committee, and the rule of Massachusetts is if more than 4 of you, I'm on a 7-member board. If more than 4 of you are together, it's a public meeting. There's nothing like that in the ARRL, correct? You can.
No, it's not a government agency, so it doesn't have. I mean, Connecticut has a similar rule, and for town government, state government, but the ARRL board's a nonprofit, and they can have their meetings with small or large groups, and there's no disclosure, no public view of it.
Now, more recently, the dues were increased, which was not unreasonable, but you had to pay for the magazine. So to get what you had before, instead of paying $49, you're paying $85.
Yep.
Were those that had signed up previously, like maybe took a 3-year renewal, did they also have to pay the additional $25 for the magazine if they wanted?
It's my understanding they did, and I think that was a mistake. If you pay for something, you should get what you pay for. And the ARRL didn't roll that out very well. I think they could have done it in a couple of steps. instead of doing it all at once. Yeah, dues increase in general was necessary, but the change to those getting QSD and that had paid for it, I think was not handled well.
More recently, the ARRL Logbook of the World, which is not a logbook, is anything but a logbook. A Logbook of the World was down for probably a couple of months, and then it was recently announced that the ARRL had to pay $1 million in order to get their data back. Now, it was also in that was that they have had some insurance. Do you have any idea how much the ARRL was out on that?
Well, they just posted something this week on the website that basically said we paid $1 million and our insurance is going to cover. I don't think they said all of it, but most of it. So I know it wasn't just Logbook of the World. I mean, it was everything. The hackers apparently had been in the system for a couple of weeks, and they really got to all of the different pieces of the ARRL IT. They're still sorting out some issues with the financial system, because when it went down, they were in the middle of doing overnight processing and updating, and that screwed up the financial database too. So that's still a work in progress. They've recovered almost everything now, but they're still not at the finish line.
But we don't know how much is out of in a sense, the members' pocket, because the members pay the dues. We don't know how much the ARRL has come up with.
No, but what the public statement said is that it's a fraction of that $1 million.
Okay, well that doesn't tell us anything really.
I know.
To speak of.
Because I think they don't have the final accounting yet either. I mean, that's since the financial system was involved in the hack, then they have to close that out before they actually have that number.
Well, some will say they know more than they're telling us.
They may. Yeah, they've been pretty scarce on information over the last 2 months or so, and I think that the reason they've given is that their insurance company and the FBI basically told them not to talk much about it, which I can certainly understand if they're trying to track down who did it and how they might recover anything lost. But I think they've done a disservice to members by not being better at communication. And board members have not communicated well either.
Recently, Rhea Jaram was pushed out into RJ. It seemed to be I mean, she was the only person of color. She was a minority and the only woman on the board. Do you have any feelings as to why that happened?
Well, there is another woman on the board. She's now a vice president, Kristen T6. What is it, WX? I forget.
Would she be appointed? Was she appointed?
She was elected by the board members to be first VP.
So she was not elected by the members.
She was originally as a director.
Okay.
Yeah, and she's very good.
Okay.
But Rhea ran into the problem where she wanted to publish a book that directly competed with some ARRL publications, and the board committee that overviews elections didn't initially understand what she was planning to do, and basically said okay, and then when the details came out, it was like, oh, that's not okay, and that's why, is my understanding, is why she was not allowed to continue because of the conflict.
Do you have an opinion as to whether she was pushed out or?
I'm sure she was pushed out because of the conflict.
But the conflict, she was initially given approval. So if someone tells me that I can for example, I'm a teacher, if I can take the kids out to the playground for an extra recess and I take them out and then I get in trouble for it, it's kind of hard for me to accept that, and that's the situation she ran into.
Yeah, I know it. But the way the Elections and Ethics Committee on the board works is that it's a group of 3 people who are not up for election this year, and their decisions can always be taken up by the full board or appealed to the full board by the individuals involved. So that ended up being a board issue itself rather than just the committee, and that was their route of handling it. They disagreed with the initial decision of the elections committee.
Do you have any feelings on supporting the CEO that is currently on, the CEO, Dave Minster?
I'm of 2 minds there. One is he can be a very personable guy. He's better than the 3 short-term CEOs before him. But since Dave Sumner retired about 10 years ago, the board and the CEO have not done well overall. Many of the things he's doing are, I think, in a positive direction. He can be very abrupt sometimes with people, especially those who disagree with him loudly. And that's probably the place where I would see improvement.
The current CEO, Dave Minster, do you have a view on how he's doing his job?
Yes. I have lunch with Dave a couple of times a year just to catch up on things, and we have some really good conversations. He's got a difficult board to deal with, and I would say he's doing an okay job. In some ways he's doing really good, in some ways he's not.
Would you support Dave Minster at this point if you were at a board meeting and it was your turn, the vote was coming up to whether to hire him?
Maybe. And I won't say yes or I won't say no, partly because it's hard to know what's going on internally and what the issues are, because they don't have to disclose all the discussions they're doing. So I'm cautiously supportive, but I don't know the detail, and the board members in generally don't talk much about it. So the short answer is cautiously supportive, but in a few years we're going to have to look at him retiring. I think he's in his early 60s now, and at some point we're going to need to start looking for another CEO, and that takes a couple of years. The board moves very slowly, and in the past several times a CEO has been hired, they have not done well at that process, and have picked some people that were not a good match for the organization.
People are going to be voting for you, or I think it's AB 10C. Is that Fred Kremer? Why should they vote for you over the person running against you?
The major reason I'm running is I've been off the board for 6 years now, and I'm not convinced that the last 6 years the board has focused enough on their key job, which is making sure the ARRL is viable as an organization, and number 2 is that we have strong ties to both the FCC and Congress to get the kind of support we occasionally need from them. FCC still has half a dozen things on their agenda from more than 6 years ago that they haven't dealt with, and that's a disservice not only to Ham Radio but to other radio services. They just are way too slow as an organization and way too bureaucratic.
All right, you are Fred. How do you pronounce your last name? Hoppengarten. Hoppengarten. And K1VR. And not to jump on my own question here, but which sounds a little confusing. I came up to you. You have a little booth here at the Ham Exposition. What did I say to you?
You said, "Are you running?"
and you said, go ahead.
I tried. I filed the papers to run for the office of director for the New England division of ARRL on Thursday night. Turns out I left out a little part. On Friday morning at 11:05 a.m. with a noon deadline, the secretary to the CEO notified me that there was a piece of my application missing. But I wasn't in my office at that moment. When I did get back, I filed the missing piece at 12:27, 27 minutes after the noon deadline. And the Ethics and Elections Committee has disqualified me, saying that I'm ineligible. I'm not ineligible. I just filed a piece of the application a little late when they told me it was missing by pure inadvertence.
The natural question is, and I do this, I'm a teacher, and I used to tell students, if you were late with something, that's your fault. And I would set a deadline, and if they missed the deadline by even a minute, I didn't let them in. So they got used to turning things in days ahead of time for fear of not missing. What kind of blame do you take for this?
I take all the blame. I should have done it. I'd like to shoot myself, but that's really not a socially acceptable response. On the other hand, no one was harmed. I got no competitive advantage, and the piece that I did not file had been done days in advance. It just wasn't included in the PDF.
Okay. So if you ran last time and didn't win, but you came pretty close.
I was 54 votes short.
So let me ask you some questions about what's going on at the ARRL. N2RJ Rita Jaram was kind of booted off. Do you have an opinion about that?
Well, it's a little more complex than booted off. Yes, she was made to feel uncomfortable because they were coming after her, but she landed working on projects for the Amateur Radio Digital Corporation, ARDC.
Right.
And that's actually a very attractive place to be because they're giving out so much money. She has really more responsibility now than she had when she was on the board, when she was just one of 15 votes.
Do you think she was pushed out by the CEO?
By the CEO? You know, I don't know how to answer that question, but I do know is that she wasn't on anybody's Christmas card list, let's put it that way. She was made to feel very uncomfortable, and probably because of some of the positions that she took.
And, I can empathize with that, and I had a discussion with her online about that. And I told her I felt she should have stayed, even if she was uncomfortable, because I'm on a school committee in my town, and I'm tend to thought of not all that much different a situation than she is, but I still speak out and I stay, even though I'm not popular with the rest of the members. But the rest of the members don't determine who's there. The voters do. And that's what I told her. I said your members in your district determine, but she decided to leave, and I was pretty much disappointed. What happened with you used to be a member and you paid your $49 and you got QST. I realized that there was an increase in dues, and that was probably due, but they now charge $25 additional for QST. Whether that's justified or not, I don't know, but do you have an opinion on the members who had signed up maybe 3 years before this happened, and they are forced to pay the $25? Do you have an opinion on that?
Well, what you just said was, we don't know whether it was justified or not. The motion to raise the dues to $59 was made by the New England director, Fred Kemmerer, AB1OC. When he was asked by the Southwestern, I think it is, director, N6AA, for the justification behind the numbers, he declined to provide them. So the underlying analysis is not available even to other directors. Therefore, I have a hard time answering your question about whether it was justified or not, because the numbers are being kept secret.
Well, what about the morality of someone signing up 3 years ago, so assuming they were going to get and they were supposed to get QST, and not?
With respect to the issue of someone who signed up to get 3 years of membership, QSTs included, and effectively the paper delivery for the last 2 years was cut off, I think that's just grossly unfair and improper and a terrible, terrible idea. They eventually decided to rectify that, but why didn't they think about it in the first place?
So he rectified. In other words, someone who signed up 3 years ago does not have to pay the $25 extra?
I'm under the understanding that they reversed that decision at a recent board meeting.
Okay, I was on a...
But only for these people who paid in advance.
But if I wanted to join now, I understand that QST is extra. I get that.
Correct.
What is this thing called the shadow board?
Wait a second, before we say it's extra, the paper version is extra. You can still read it.
That's correct.
It's
That's correct.
part of your membership to read it online. Plus, something that a lot of people don't realize, they now get something they didn't get before, which is access to the electronic version of some of the additional publications like QEX, NCJ, and OTA.
Okay.
So there's a way to argue that they now get more than they used to get, but it's absolutely true they don't get the paper version of QST.
What is the shadow board?
Well, this is a phrase that was created by K1TWF, then the first vice president. And apparently, I'm not on it, I never was on it, and maybe I'm not on anybody's Christmas list either, but apparently it's people who get together before the meeting and arrange what they're going to push through.
Well, being on the school committee in a public body, we can't meet, four of it, I'm on a 7-member board, 4 of us can't meet without a public notice. Now I realize...
and I think that's a good idea.
Because it looks like the things are done behind what they should be done.
Instead of being done in public, they're done secretly. And I think that many members of this current board embrace the secrecy.
Do you have? Is there any possibility that you could wind up running, or are you basically boxed out of running for a directorship?
I filed a request for review or reconsideration by the Ethics and Elections Committee, which I used to be the chairman of. They have the power to reverse their initial decision, and I have also asked if they do not reverse the decision for a review by the full board. A review by the full board will require, I think it's 5 votes in order to make that happen.
Do you have any legal option outside of, in other words, can you sue them?
I could, but this is not a good subject matter for a lawsuit. I'm just not the kind of guy who's going to try to upend the league with a lawsuit. It's going to cost a lot of money. The outcome would be uncertain. It not only cost me money, it would cost the league money. It's just not the right thing to do for the members.
Okay, we've discussed the ARRL, and you're running, or not in this case, running for being a New England director. But that's not why you're here. Why are you here?
I'm here at this convention to solicit help from New England clubs to support the bill the ARRL has before Congress, H.R. 406, and a companion Senate bill. We have a bunch of co-sponsors, it's bipartisan, and we really need more co-sponsors. So I'm trying to find club officers who will help in pushing our program to get co-sponsors in Congress, both sides of the aisle, for this bill which would allow the same kinds of antennas already allowed for satellite TV, TV broadcast service antennas for VHF and UHF, wireless internet service providers, and also the use of a flagpole, which you're allowed to use under federal law, but to use the same flagpole as a ham radio antenna, a dual use, as it were.
Is the ARRL involved in this in any way?
It's the ARRL that's promoting the bill, and I've been working on it. I was a co-author of the bill. I've been working on it for ARRL for a couple of years now.
Are you working on it as an attorney, or?
I am an attorney. I can never take off my attorney's hat, but it helps to be an attorney when you're lobbying in Congress.
And are you being paid for this? Is this?
No.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Okay. You just saw an interview with two people. The latter one being a fellow who tried to run for ARRL Director and who has run for it before. The problem was there was a tiny little technical error he made, and Dave Minster made sure he couldn't run because he knew he wasn't a fan of the fellow K1BR. In any event, there was a ARRL forum headed by another person who's running for director, AB10C, Fred Kremer, and I tried to interview him, but he declined an interview. He said he was too busy. So he did present at the forum, and the funny thing at the forum is I've gone to a lot of these ARRL forums where they basically, the audience during question and answer basically kisses the butt of the presenter. That did not happen this time. Out of probably 9 questions at the end, 9 were very confrontational. I had asked a question about the shadow board, and that really got Fred going quite a bit. But mine really wasn't that confrontational, but the other 8 people really had it in for him. So I hope you enjoyed this video. I don't think I'm going to be doing anything more, so this will probably be it. The flea market for me was I spent less than $100.
For the next 60 seconds, this station will conduct a test of the emergency broadcast system.
This is only a test.
This is a test of the emergency broadcast system. And that concludes our test of the emergency broadcast system.
Did you pay us?